Hello everyone, it's Helen at Journaling Planet, and today I'm going to show you a little video I made whilst playing with a jelly plate for the first time. It's just a small jelly plate, 3 inches by 5 inches. It's about the size of a mobile phone. There were definitely some things that I would do differently next time I pick up my jelly plate. For those of you who are experienced with the jelly plate, well, you can watch this a bit like a horror movie where you're shouting at the character, "No, don't go down that dark alley." Because definitely mistakes are made and I do some things differently. For transparency, this video is sped up 2 times. So this whole process took me less than half an hour. And as you'll see, I get a lot of different papers out of this. Just a half-hour session. And it's my first time. So probably I will be able to speed up in future and do things slightly quicker. I had a couple of motifs in mind when I started playing. I wanted a leafy motif for the front of a zine I'm making for my journal, and I wanted a sort of river motif and a sea motif for various other projects that I'm working on. So this is me starting out with the river motif, already put down the blue and pulled that up, and now going in with this green stencil, mixed in some white. And what I found was I really did need to press into the stencil a lot more than I expected to, but I was pretty pleased with how that came out. And then I was just desperate to make sure I used every impression on the jelly plate. Probably after you've been doing it a while, you get a bit bored of doing this, but I was like taking the paint off the stencil, then taking the paint off the jelly plate where the stencil had left an impression. And I don't know, I just hate waste, so I'm not going to waste any paint that I put down. All of these impressions I was quite pleased with to begin with. I thought I did quite well. I was also slightly obsessed with rolling off the excess paint on my jelly plate, which wasn't entirely necessary. I wanted to keep my jelly plate, my new jelly plate, very clean. It wasn't really very necessary. Yes, some white paint did come up on future impressions that I made, but it actually just added to the texture. So in future, I'm really not going to be very bothered about that. I mean, if I'm really bothered if there's a really weird colour on there, then I'll get a bit of kitchen towel and wipe it off. But it actually turned out quite well, having extra layers down that didn't completely come up. So this is me going in for my leafy motif, starting out with a lighter green. And then I was looking for my leaf stencil, which took me a moment because I wanted to go in with a darker green. And what I found with this impression is that I was able to take 2 different impressions, just like the others with the stencil. One where you've got the leaves kind of filled in, and another one where the leaves are just white, the white negative space that's left around by the stencil. What I enjoyed about this process was that actually using a jelly plate was a lot easier than I was expecting. You see so many tutorials online, so you think, oh, it must be really complicated. But it's really just a matter of putting your paint down, taking an impression, and then adding layers as you want. And you can even just let each layer dry and build up multiple layers and take it all off in one print. But I didn't do that in this session because that seems very ambitious for a first attempt. I just decided to keep things simple, put some stencils down. I really wish I'd pressed the stencil down a little bit more with this leaf motif, just where the stem is. I would have liked a little bit more definition. So that's one place where I make a bit of a mistake, and I wish I had pressed it down a little bit harder to get a deeper impression on that stem, but it's still beautiful. So far this is all looking really good. I did use both of these leaf print impressions on my zine project, and I just got some black pen and went in and did some leaf doodling on the jelly print, and it looks really nice. So I am pleased with how these projects turn out in terms of their application. You can do them and then very quickly find a place to use them. They're just beautiful things in their own right. I have resisted buying a jelly plate for a really long time. I'm not totally sure why. I think mostly that it just seemed like a lot of effort. Like, oh, there's going to have to be loads of things lying around and it's going to take up a lot of space and it's going to be, just a long process. And none of that was true. I don't know where I got these ideas from. If you're resisting because, like me, you just think it's going to be a big ordeal to do, I can tell you, certainly using a small one, it was really easy. You can probably just see in the video, I've got a piece of sort of plastic, hard plastic that came with a picture frame. The plastic got scratched, so I couldn't use it in the frame. It was only scratched on one side, so I turned it over and used it as a base to put my jelly plate on because you do need a smooth surface. And I was glad I did because you can probably see around the jelly plate, there is a lot of places where my brayer touches and kind of goes off the plate itself. So to prevent mess on my table, I was really glad that I had that piece of plastic down. So this is me starting to go in now for I think it's the C motif, yes. And this one came out really beautifully. I don't know whether it's because I applied slightly more paint. Apparently you've got to be quite careful about how much paint you put on and make sure you don't put too much on. But this I felt was just the moment where I got the right amount of paint. It was a really thick transfer and it just, to me, looked how I imagined it would look. Just beautiful. And then, of course, I was obsessed with going in and getting the template impression. I just ended up doing that on one of the scrap pieces of paper that I have at the side to roll my brayer on. And I am hoping that these scrap pieces of paper that I'm rolling my brayer on will also be used in my projects because they're essentially really beautiful painty papers. So with the jelly plate, yes, you're getting all the motifs that you pull off your jelly plate, all the textures, all the patterns, but you're also getting these great painty papers at the side where you're rolling your brayer on it. And it's all very usable. It all looks beautiful in the projects that we put together. I did also notice something else that I noticed, and I've heard people talk about this in tutorials, is that there is a particular motion that works well when you are working with a brayer, and that's to push upwards a lot rather than roll back and forward. Push upwards and pull down so you can manipulate the paint. This is the only one that I did a third layer on, and I really love how it came out. So that's my sort of river motif done. So yeah, there definitely is an action to the brayer that works best, pushing and pulling rather than rolling backwards and forwards. And again, I have heard this said on the odd tutorial, but I didn't really understand what they were really talking about until I did it myself. So a lot of the things that I've heard on tutorials definitely came to fruition, if you like, sort of made sense to me when I actually did this process for myself. Just a reminder while I'm loading up the paint on my brayer here that I do send out newsletters with free printables, prompts, and creative pep talks. And you can access those by my Substack below. So if you fancy having some of that in your inbox, it's usually once every 1 to 2 months that I send something out, unless life really gets in the way. So it's not loads of emails. If you fancy just connecting on a semi-regular basis, do sign up. It's completely free, and I just like chatting with you all about the craft. So this is the part where I did something a bit wrong. And anyone who's used a jelly plate before will know exactly what's going to happen next when they see the colour paint that I choose for my motif. And this yellow, it does work. I definitely like the effect, but it's very subtle, shall we say. Even when you can see I add more paint. Even when I put more paint on, it's still a very subtle motif that comes out on this gel plate. There's me flipping my stencil over so the writing is mirrored and comes out the right way up. It's very, very important to do that if you're using writing, otherwise your writing will come out backwards. Now you can see that's come out the right way. However, if I was to do this again, I mean, it looks nice, but if I was to do this again, I'd probably put the yellow in the background and the purple as the motif, because then I would just know that the motif will stand out. Knowing that it creates that effect is very useful in case I want a subtle effect in future. And then this is me just running down the papers that I've made, the painty papers with my brayer. The leaf motif, that's kind of negative space with the white. I wish I'd pressed down the stencil a little bit more on that one. The river and the text stencil. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was useful and enlightening. I certainly found the experience interesting.